So I guess I watched four things. One of them is a rewatching thing. So, I mentioned last week I watched Puella Magi Madoka Magica Volume 2, which had the 5th through 8th episodes in it. I ended up watching them again with my friend on Thursday, because, right, when I first got them, it's like, I probably won't mind watching it a second time, and the only reason I'm even mentioning it now is because it felt like Madoka Magica had some real rewatch value to it. Like, hearing what the characters say, knowing definitely what's going to happen, it's kind of hard to watch in a very horrifying way, I guess. It's the only way I can think of to put it. I can definitely agree that Madoka is, even now only 2/3 of the way through the series, earned its horror tag. Because I think it has that, along with a bunch of other really alarming tags. But there we go. I can't wait to finish this series. Let's see. Next on the list is Infinite Stratos. And my first impression while watching it was it felt like Strike Witches, except they had their fucking pants on. Now, that said, it of course is different in more than just that way. There's also the difference in that you've got a male lead instead of a female lead, and thus it's not Moe Blob, it's harem. And I thought the action in Infinite Stratos actually felt pretty interesting to watch. I'm not entirely sure why. I'm not going to say for certain that it's definitely better than other things, but my impression going through it is like, you could probably watch Infinite Stratos for the action, whereas for Strike Witches, you probably ought to have your priorities in a slightly different place. Not to say that Strike Witches didn't have its interesting things about it, but Strike Witches is what it is, and I do hope the second season comes out on DVD. I'd buy it, but it's really up to Funimation, I guess, if they think there really is a market, because if they really say anything, I'm pretty much guaranteed to buy it, right? So, that was actually a pretty easy one to cover. The next one, I may get more complicated, but maybe not. But I watched Naruto Shippuden Set 10, and it was good again. I guess this is because if you consider what happened in the last set was the story that was started in the previous set as an event that more or less didn't really change the state of the story or the world at all. It just kind of kept it in a kind of its usual Naruto fluxy equilibrium, kind of going through the motions as if something's happening, but in the end, nothing really happened-ish. It didn't even really feel like... It felt like it was maybe an attempt at doing some character development, but doesn't really feel, per se, that it really did anything that'll have any lasting effects, other than certain thing, which I'm probably not going to reveal, but was kind of the entire point of the story, so I don't know. I can say, though, that this time the series is finally doing stuff that's relevant. Very interesting reveals, information, characters that I had personally decided they were acting in a fairly uninteresting way suddenly became interesting. Something about it felt convoluted in a way, like it was just conveniently done, but for the most part, at a minimum, it is definitely leaps and bounds better than the previous set. And this was my friend's opinion. Well, and you can tell things are good because I've waited this long before trying to compare it to One Piece. In fact, I'm just going to stop there and not compare to One Piece. Other than this, I'll just say that I'm actually looking forward to Set 11. We didn't fall asleep, or almost fall asleep watching this one. And that's a good thing, because we're kind of depriving ourselves of sleep lately. Or maybe that's just me. But if the me is the we, then we can go on to the next anime, which is what I finished up, the last thing I watched, started it later in the weekend, I guess. Oh, that's that's why I didn't watch as much anime as I thought. Okay, that makes sense. So the final thing I watched was My Bride is a Mermaid. Now I had previously watched the first 13 episodes, but since it had been a while and not as much of it had stuck as well, actually more of it stuck than I thought had. So I ended up, but I didn't know how much had stuck, and I decided not to take chances, and I started watching it from the beginning so that I could get a complete picture of the series from beginning to end, and that was probably a good way to do it. So the first thing is this anime probably rubs on my pet peeve of anime that think that abusing males is supposed to be a funny thing. More so than others. And you can tell that they were really bad in this one simply because his catch sound effect is basically a whining, abused dog. And I also don't find the abuse of dogs funny. It's a really strange thing in Gunbuster, for example, where for some reason the people... This is Gunbuster 2. For some reason they thought that this one specific dog being kicked would be a funny joke, and I just thought it was very tasteless. Because usually, and this is a well-known trope, and it didn't feel like it was a deconstruction or an inversion of the trope or anything like that, but usually TV tropes calls these things kick the dog moments, where you're supposed to know that, oh, this person did something bad, they kicked a dog, and everybody likes dogs, that's how we know they're a bad guy. But here we have main characters that we're not supposed to think are entirely bad or entirely wrong. And this is in Gunbuster 2, and not kind of indirectly in My Bride is a Mermaid. And at first, it really disappointed me because as uncomfortable as it made me feeling, I couldn't help but admit that it also did some of the wildest, wackiest, crazy things I've seen before. I mean, it's actually got some really creative things, so I didn't understand why it had to do this other stuff. But, to give it credit, I felt like it redeemed itself by the ending. As in, like, I thought the ending was very satisfactory, taking everything into account, the story, the various forms of humor, and in the end, I have to say that it was kind of a satisfactory watch. More so than a lot of stuff that depends so heavily on abuse the guy kind of premises. So there you go. That was actually very interesting of it. I feel like talking about more, but again, one of the interesting things about it is just its strange, humorous ideas that come out of left field, or however you put that. And I guess for y'all, I'm not going to try and spoil a lot of that stuff that was just real funny, even though I'm really tempted to. So I'll go ahead and leave it there, and that's pretty much all I watched this week, anime-wise. There were a couple of non-anime things in there. It took me a while to remember what all those were, and that's why I hadn't watched more anime than that, but I guess it's still a good one. So there you go.